Hey, 8th grade language arts students, talking today about theme and central idea. Once my slides pull up here. These are both things that we have talked about a lot through this unit so far, but I think there's some confusion still on how we come up with our themes and how we come up with our central ideas. For the most part, you guys have done a really good job of taking notes throughout your reading. You've taken notes on things you've learned, things you're thinking, predictions you're making, connections you're making, things like that. But now we need to figure out how do we actually take those notes and turn them into some ideas that we can that we can apply and take away from our books. Okay, so themes and central ideas are the main two things we're focusing on here. So how do we turn our motifs into themes? You may be wondering, well, what in the world is a motif? I bet so far some of the things you've taken notes on are actually motifs. So these are one word, big ideas from a text that are related to the characters and the struggles they're going through. So these are some of those big words, those big, like catchy cliche words like hope and endurance and trust and maybe things like family and courage. So those are motifs. I want you to think about your book so far. Think about what the characters are going through, what struggles, what challenges they have, and what motifs come to mind. You want to start with a list of like probably 3 or 4. Think about your main character, but think about your side characters as well. What are the main 3 or 4 words you would use to describe their conflicts, or that you would use to describe the situations that they're in right now? So we start off with that list of 3 or 4. And then we take one of those to start, and you could start with any of them, but you just take one that you feel like maybe is the biggest or the most important. And we look at our notes based on that motif. We think about our book. We need to make sure that we're thinking this through because our thinking could take us different directions. So really spend some time thinking, what does the author actually think about this motif? That's the question you should pose. What does the author think about this motif? We're curious about the author's thoughts here because the author is the one putting this down on the page. The author's thoughts determine a lot about how the characters actually react. So the author is going to include certain details to expose these themes, to bring them to light. And so we want to pay attention to what does the author actually think or believe about this motif. Next, we want to write out a full sentence response to what the author believes about this motif. So it should just start just like that. The author believes blank about trust. Okay, what does the author believe about trust? When you write out that full sentence, what you can then do is you can go back in and you can cross out the first part of that sentence, the first part of the prompt, which was the author believes blank. What you're left with is a theme or a statement. It's going to sound something like that you could caption an Instagram post with. Okay, it's going to be something that sounds kind of cliche, but that is a theme. That is a takeaway. That is a lesson learned by the characters. So next, in the right-hand column, we're thinking about central ideas here. I think there's probably more confusion when it comes to central ideas compared to themes. We're thinking about how do we turn the facts that we've learned, that we've observed, the things that we have been interested in our book so far related to the topic, and how do we turn those into actual central ideas? Like, what does it mean for there to be a central idea? Well, we do kind of the same process. We look at our notes. We think about the subtopics within the topic. Most likely your book has one big overall topic like World War II, but within that there are multiple subtopics. These are factual things that your book is also about, but on a smaller scale. I would say each of your books probably has at least 3 or 4 subtopics, and so start there. Once you have your list of subtopics, we want to write out an unbiased, true statement about these subtopics. So this process is pretty simple, and similar to what we just did with theme. We just are going to write out what is a fact, what is a statement that we have learned from our books so far about this subtopic. This should be unbiased. It should be truthful. It shouldn't have anything to do with your characters. If you find yourself tempted to say something about how the information or the subtopic is related to the characters, then you might be talking more about theme than you are about central idea. So let's see how this plays out. I've done this for you using some motifs and subtopics from my book, Endurance. So I started off and I came up with 3 motifs of leadership, endurance, and toughness. So I'm going to pick one of those and I'm going to think, what does the author believe about that motif? I picked leadership, and I said the author believes that true leadership means taking full responsibility for the actions of your team. I've noticed that come through in the book. The author has pretty clearly been focused on that motif and on that phrase, and so I'm going to write that out. Next, I just go back in and I cross out that beginning part. The author believes that. And I'm left with leadership means taking full responsibility for the actions of your team. And that would be my theme. Pretty simple, right? When we go to subtopics next, I've listed out a few. I had the ship, which was called Endurance. I had Antarctica. I had sea or ice travel and survival. Now, I want to clarify there, I don't necessarily mean the endurance and toughness it takes to survive. I mean, what does it actually mean for a human being to survive in these tough conditions? What does your body require in terms of nutrition? What does your body require in terms of like the ability to focus and maintain a positive outlook? Those are things that are biological that the body needs to do. So there's 4 subtopics that I think the book is about. So I'm going to pick one of them, and I'm going to write out a statement or a fact that I've learned about that subtopic. I picked I picked sea and ice travel, and a fact that I wrote out was traveling on ice involves relying on wind and sea currents. Now, I did this in my first block today, and when I wrote it out the first time, I said that traveling on ice can be challenging because you have to rely on wind and sea currents. I revised that because by adding the fact that it's challenging, I'm kind of making it more about the theme. I'm involving the characters in that. By saying that it's challenging, really that's a biased opinion. There could be somebody who disagrees with me and says, well, it's not that hard. You just have to learn how to follow the wind and sea currents. And so I removed that part, and now I believe it's a factual, unbiased statement. Traveling on ice involves relying on wind and sea currents. I could repeat this process with any of my motifs, any of my subtopics, multiple times. I don't want you to think that these are the only themes or subtopics or themes or central ideas that I could take away from my book so far. There are probably dozens of different ways that I could rephrase these by focusing on different motifs or different subtopics. So don't get too focused on one motif or one subtopic, but make sure that you are expanding your thoughts to include all of the amazing things that you're learning in your book so far. All right. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this helps you to identify your themes and central ideas in your texts.